Good evening, everyone. How are you doing today? Welcome back to Restitching the Tapestry with my dear friend Ari, whose YouTube channel is titled Strange Nothings. So go please check out their YouTube channel and subscribe if you would be so kind. I am pulling up the live stream right now just to make sure that it's displaying on YouTube correctly because latent paranoia, I guess, about that. Oh, Igny's tuning in. Yay. Perfect. So we'll wait a couple of minutes and just chit chat a little bit and wait for some people to tune in. So Ari, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. Thanks again for having me. I can't believe we're all the way on episode 3.
I know it's crazy to think it's that immediate, that it's been this fast. So, and before long I have a feeling it's going to be like, oh, episode 20, we'll see. Like, that's going to be fun. I'm excited about that. Let's see. Taylor's here. Hi, Taylor and Igny. It says that we have
Oh,
5
yay, Taylor's
people.
here.
I love the people that tune in for these shows with us because I feel like we all have really good conversation because the truth is sometimes reading the comments help us reframe what we're looking at, and I find that very valuable. And sometimes I'm just genuinely inarticulate, so it's kind of nice to, like, if I say something wrong, for like somebody to be like, hey Donny, like, reassess what you just mentioned. All right, so today's episode is intended to continue the topics that we were talking about in last week's episode. So last week we created an episode titled Putting the Plus in LGBTQ plus, where we were talking about happenings in the LGBTQ community and talking about that crucial plus area of different identities that don't often get discussed. And we're going to be continuing that today, especially since last time we really focused a lot on the politics. We will be talking a little bit more about politics today, but we will also be making time for having conversation about those identities placed in the plus category for sure.
Yes.
So, before we get started, our show's mission statement. Okay. So, of course, many witness different atrocities, large and small, and that tends to fray the social fabric around us, especially as we've seen lately. And much of the time, many feel powerless and know not how to address such things. And over time, this fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media because everyone has immediate access to news reports or different instances where they've been made exposed to these different traumas. So having that exposure, that virality, makes it more easy for people to watch it happen in real time and share in a collective grief and outrage. So that begs the question of what can we do to mend the communities that have seen considerable tragedy, most of which privileged groups have caused, and many who won't admit their personal involvement in. So, together with this show, let's work on restitching the tapestry through conversation, creativity, action, and education. Okay. So, um, so first and foremost, let's reflect a little bit on what's been happening the past week. Okay, so
Well, what's the big news?
the big news for the LGBTQ plus community is the Supreme Court passed a bit of legislation that includes the LGBTQ plus community in workplace protections. This is something that the LGBTQ plus community has wanted for so long, like so long, because many of us have felt unsafe. Many have actually had jobs taken away from them due to their identities. Many have had limited access to jobs because of their identities. So this was a monumental situation, and I'm so happy that it happened. Ari, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, you saw my video.
Yes, please, if you could summarize what your video was about, that would be
So
awesome.
it was really bittersweet for me because I don't know if you know about who Amy Stevens is. She was the person who brought the case to the Supreme Court, and she was waiting to hear back from the people, the Supreme Court justices, and she was having kidney failure. And I believe if she had had a job, she might have had the health care to take care of her ailments. And so she wrote what she would have said had she had won the case. So there was there was a speech given in her honor for having won the case, but unfortunately, back in May, she had died before the courts had reached a decision. So for me, my first thought when they came to the decision, just a couple months after she had died, was that I was upset. Um,
Mhm.
because I felt as though they had waited until Pride Month to release the decision, and that I felt as though they had kind of kept the decision from being public, even though like maybe they had known in advance, and
Mhm.
that it was sort of like a political posturing, and that I was sort of, and I had all of these mixed emotions right away, that I was like, this seemed like it was kind of like a game almost, and I was like kind of upset about it. And because she had fought for this for so long, and that this was something that she had given her life to, and that like she had died before they had come to the decision. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I was just sobbing on camera about it, because I was just so overwhelmed by the decision, and I was just hoping that the next person who um didn't get fired because of these workplace protections, and I was grateful for what she had given her life to, um, that it wouldn't happen to the next person. But it just seems so bittersweet that she had given her whole life for this and that she had died. And it just seems so upsetting to me, because it was just, you know, it didn't have to be like this.
Yeah, and until I watched your video, I actually didn't consider that because I was so distracted by the high of the news. But once I reframed it and looked at it that way, it did anger me, the fact that they were almost using this as like, oh, here is a present for you for Pride Month. And it's like, you don't need, like, this isn't a present for us. This is something that we should have had a long time ago. And it almost, looking at it now, seems insulting, not only in like dishonoring Amy Stevens, but also insulting to us, because it makes it seem like, oh, here's your olive branch, gay community. There you go. You know.
Yeah, because I read an article that said when they read the decision, like the justices, they also said happy pride. And I was just like, I kind of just wanted to be like, fuck you. It was sort
Mhm.
of just like, go screw yourself. Like, like, thanks a lot. You go fuck yourself. Excuse my language. Like,
No, it's okay. Be as profane as you want. I'm totally cool with that. Oh, looks like Xander's here, and Igny says we shouldn't have to have martyrs. Agreed. Like, I I I completely agree with that.
Right, and that's what I said. That's why I was so upset about it, is that she shouldn't have to kill herself in order for the next person to be like saved.
Hmm.
And that's what I was about to get to, is that like we still don't have housing protections, and that,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's, well, and the thing is, like, people.
and healthcare,
Yeah, I
healthcare.
mentioned this in my last a couple videos ago, I think. Because I was so angry, and like, honestly, our community is so exhausted, you know. And the truth is, I think when these successes happen, um, the like cisgender hetero sexual communities feel as though, like, oh, well, you got what you want. It's like, this is great. Now we can move on, you know, like, it, like, dealing with us as some sort of, like, I don't know, chore for them. And I'm so angry because this type of what's the word I'm thinking of? Complacency, this type of like dismissal suggests that the job is done. There's still so many things we don't have. Like you mentioned, we don't have access. Well, I mean, certain parts of our communities don't have equal access to medical. There are like housing protections that aren't even within our range of grasp. There's a lot of like ancestral rights that aren't even there, you know, or inheritance rights. So,
Well, and we were talking about it last time, how you can't serve in the military because you're trans. You can get kicked out of the military because you're trans.
mhm.
So, and we said that, that takes away from your livelihood to better yourself and to make it so that you can get out of a certain socioeconomic situation. Um, and that you get certain health protections and the GI Bill and certain things. Although I believe that it's a trap because they're trying to, I don't believe in the military industrial complex, but that's another story. But
Another episode for us.
um, but to not include people in the military is a problem that made it difficult for trans people to pull themselves out of a situation that currently, cis people are able to receive benefits from that trans people aren't able to, and that's wrong. And they get housing benefits, they get all of these other benefits that trans people just are losing rights to, healthcare benefits, and it's slowly being eked away from them because of the Trump administration. And they're doing it during Pride Month, they're doing it throughout the year, and they're slowly eking them away. And I think it's wrong. I think that it's and I I hate to say it, but um I think it's not just because it's a matter of the fact that it's the trans community, but it's also an intersectionality. And it's because he is targeting Black trans women because um, they're the ones who will suffer the most.
Mhm. Well, and the thing is, like, because today I got really angry because our president posted a tweet that says, "These horrible and politically charged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are shotgun blasts into the face of people that are proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. We need more justices or we will lose our Second Amendment and everything else. Vote Trump 2020." That's what he said. And to me, I've been getting very frustrated with people because they don't understand that there is some very distinct rhetorical manipulation happening. And his goal, especially in making statements like that, is to divide different groups of people. So he's trying to appeal to those who have the most social power and accessibility, and he's distinguishing them from different groups like Black trans women, for example,
Mhm.
in order to further weaken them and further villainize them to these more powerful groups. And until people start seeing like the thread work in that, I don't think they're going to educate themselves and look past that really thick, sludgy rhetoric. Like I think of his rhetoric as being very thick and sludgy. It sticks to people, and the more
Well,
it gets
he's just repeating the
perpetuated.
2016 election over again. He was doing this back in 2015, 2016 during the election. I mean, he goes to his base, he repeats a bunch of garbage. He says like the worst thing. He does things like on Juneteenth where he'll have a rally and he'll say like the most garbage, horrible things he can play up. Like Xander says, he plays up the fear of the
Mhm.
other, fear of Black people, fear of trans people, fear of not just fear but hatred, and
Yep.
he'll say, he'll make fun of them, he'll say horrible garbage things about them, and he'll play up that like ugliness that's inside of people, and and
He essentially gives permission for them to act on
in a
that type
horrible
of
way.
ugliness. Yeah. And unfortunately, that just continues to damage groups who don't have that level of power and accessibility.
And I hate to say it, but there is an ugliness in this country um, that a lot of people hold, and they serve a base inside themselves, and it is white supremacy, and there is a white supremacy edge that people will follow, and it is in communities, and when you're suffering, uh, if somebody tells you when you're down and out in nowhere Virginia, and they tell you that you can be strong and great and powerful again, and all you have to do is just put the black man down or put the trans person down, and I've got the way to go. Sometimes they'll just follow their basest instincts and do it, and it's a horrible thing to say, and it's horrible. It's not exactly the nicest way of putting it, but it's a reality that we have to live in, and we have to show them that there's a better way of doing this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like he's appealing to white fragility and
Right.
heterosexual fragility, because these groups of people look at minorities and get so caught up in what they would call identity politics that they think that every other minority has something special that they don't have because they get, well, what they think is acknowledgement, when really we don't get as much acknowledgement as we should have, you know. But they base that on what they end up seeing in the media or in pop culture, so on and so forth, and they take it and run with it. So it's like, I think it's terrifying. Like Taylor says, like, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's afraid of a second term. Like, I am terrified of a second term, but I also am even more terrified of the fact that people are so easily led astray by the rhetorical manipulation.
But they're so sensitive, but and equal rights don't mean less rights for the straight white men, but they're so sensitive that any shift in rights for minorities means it's like a zero sum. They think it's a zero sum game, that it like takes away from them, and that they're so sensitive. They're like guarding a bowl, almost like a dog guarding a bowl. It's like,
Or
they're taking it away from me. They're taking it away from me.
or
And
it's like siblings, like one sibling gets something and then the other sibling's like, well, what about me? Like, what do I get? It's like, you have privilege. Like, you have a lot that a lot of other groups of people don't have, you know? The difficult thing, like, other than being in these communities, which obviously is the most difficult thing because you have to face this continual onslaught of discrimination and misinterpretation, but it's also difficult educating like cisgender heterosexual like people in power, because they don't want to acknowledge that there might be privilege on different fronts that they may have. And I don't like, I know you've had many difficult conversations with people too, but one thing that I've tried framing to people is like, hey, like, I might be in a couple of these minority communities, but I still have privilege as well.
right.
I have the privilege of being white.
Yep.
I have the privilege
I'm
of being
still white.
cisgendered.
Yep.
Yeah, you know. So, like, it's a learning
Just because
experience for a lot
just
of
because I'm
people.
one thing doesn't mean I don't benefit from something else, and you have to
Mhm.
acknowledge that, like, yeah,
Right. And because I might not be able to relate to another group's struggle, that doesn't diminish me in any way, you know, and
right,
I think that's what a lot of these different groups don't realize. And the truth is we see this within the LGBTQ community as well. Like, I mean, especially when you look at gay and lesbians, I mean, those are the two groups that are acknowledged the most out of all of the different communities within the acronym, right? And
mhm,
there's been a lot of discrimination thrown at like transgender people and a lot of discrimination within the community like aimed at bisexual people, pansexual people. And I think like a lot of this has to do with the fact that if somebody doesn't understand something fully, they immediately kind of let themselves get swallowed in that discomfort of being exposed to something new and not allowing themselves to have an educational moment to be like, you know, hey, like I never really looked at this that way. Like, let me try to understand things from somebody else's perspective. So, Lisa's here. Hello.
hello, Lisa. Nice to
Oh,
have you
Xander and
here.
Lisa, I miss you guys. Feels like it's been 1,000 years. Courtney's here too. It's like an OGS reunion.
Bi erasure is super real.
It is, for sure. Taylor said, this morning my mother mentioned that older generations struggle to change because when they mess up, the corrections feel like attacks. They don't know that they need to change and freeze up. Okay, so that is a good point. And I actually had a recent conversation with family about white privilege as well, and it was perceived of as an attack because like the term white privilege is used so frequently that now it's kind of become associated with being an insult. And I think people have to unlearn like those different terms as insults because they're really not. They are realities. Like it is reality that white
Right,
privilege exists, that racism exists, that phobias exist, you know?
right. So we were talking about intersectionality. I just want to highlight some issues that have been happening more recently with intersectionality. There was a murder of a Black transgender woman named Titi recently. She was found hanging in a tree near a homeless encampment in Portland. There have been a lot of hangings recently. I don't know if you've noticed that in the media. Um, Mysterious hangings. I would go out on a limb, not a strong. It would be easy to go on a limb here and say that these are probably lynchings. Police have been calling them suicides, but they are mysterious deaths. Easy, but I would not call them suicides because they are definitely, yeah, definitely of the mysterious sort. Uh, they are members of the Black community. They are people who had no suicidal thoughts. They had left no notes. They were just found hanging in trees. I mean, it's mysterious at best. But the one that I wanted to highlight most was TT because um, uh, she was a Black transgender woman. She was homeless. They opened up her case and they were reopened up her case and they were looking into it again. But this is a problem that's happening in the United States is that there is a higher number of Black transgender women that are murdered at higher rates than just transgender women in general. There was, I don't know if it was a year ago or 2 years ago, that a woman in Texas, a Black transgender woman, was killed at a gas station. She was shot to death, and they had video of it. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, yeah.
Um, it's just, there are these horrific murders that happen of Black transgender women that happen regularly, and it sounds like it's a small number. Like the article that I had said in 2018 it was only 22, but you have to remember the transgender community is small, so 22 a year is a large number for a community that is small and then getting depleted every year, getting smaller. So it scares me to hear those numbers because they add up after a while, and it's just, I hate to see Black women getting murdered every year by white supremacists, especially in the Pacific Northwest, because it's not right. And I think that, if you have a chance, if you are like me and do letter writing campaigns, if you can get a hold of some police or some public officials and start doing some letter writing campaigns and start asking public officials to start looking into things more and asking them, hey, these are not suicides, these are murders, do some letter writing. Could you do that? I would be
Yeah.
appreciated.
One, like it's unsettling also because a lot of it seems like these cases are decided on in haste. Whereas if we look at the George Floyd situation, because of the outcry, like they actually spent time on it, and it almost seemed like too much time making the determination. And like it's like there's just these weird diverging situations where some groups, like some like people in authority, will just like sweep it under the rug and act like, oh well, this is just the usual. It's not the usual. Like you were
Right.
saying, in communities this small, it's very, very significant.
That's why that's why we as white people need to start asking our public officials to look into things and to not just take them at their word. And that's why I do letter writing campaigns. I have been, about Breonna Taylor, I have just been bombarding the Attorney General's email box every day, like, why haven't you done something about this? Why haven't you, charged her killers with her death? Every day I'm writing an email, and it's like,
Well,
I'm not
yeah, and
trying to
they're so
be like
employed
too
too.
performative, but like we should be asking these public officials, like, why aren't you doing something about this every day?
Yeah,
Because if we do something together collectively, if like they get a few thousand emails from us every day, they will do something about it.
it's just sad that it takes that much to get someone to act on something that would, like, from a morality standpoint, seem like the best thing to do.
But that's what happens when we live in a white supremacist society.
That's true. That's true. Taylor says, I have heard that handwritten letters get a large amount of attention because they're so uncommon. That's interesting. Yeah.
I'll
But,
write letters if I have to. I mean, I'll do whatever it
oh,
takes.
yeah. I've never tried handwriting letters. I've sent emails before, but I mean, if handwriting gets attention, then that's what you got to do. Yep, and Xander says, especially at the local level, all it takes is a couple of emails from constituents to make a difference. And especially in like smaller communities too, because in a lot of smaller communities, I think a lot of people don't realize that they can reach out directly and talk to those who represent them. And they don't always take advantage of that. Or people assume that they're just going to, like, that their words are going to fall on people who won't take any action, and really that's what they're there for. They're there to listen. They are there to create change. Whether or not they do, that's, another story, but it doesn't hurt trying to provoke that change to occur.
Anyway, I just like being a bug these days.
There's nothing wrong with that. We need so much of that right now. Oh, so I think this is an excellent opportunity to mention the significance of getting out and voting. I've been having a surprising amount of conversations about that lately with people, because I know without fail, I will always have people in my life who are always saying, I'm not going to vote because my vote won't matter or my voice won't matter. And the truth is, if you're in one of these groups, like these more powerful groups, and you are an ally to minority groups, your voice really matters to us. So please get out there.
Vote. Vote. Please register and vote. If nothing, this election is, like, super important. Please vote. I
Yes.
know that there may be, like, some really messed up stuff that happens during this election. I'm really concerned that they're gonna cancel the election. I'm really concerned that they're gonna cancel the election, but, like, just register, be prepared to vote, get ready to vote. I'm just really hoping they don't cancel the election.
I'm hoping not either. I highly doubt they would. Oh, I don't know.
I'm really hoping they don't cancel the
Yeah, I
election.
hope they don't either. But like these like groups, like these more powerful groups, um, they don't realize that. Well, I think they assume that activists in our communities are going to speak out and do like all the talking and try to make the difference by raising our voices. But these groups don't realize that sometimes they are more apt to listen to allies because they are also part of the community, the dominant community that they're a part of, right? And that's why we really need the voices of allies and their votes and their support, like their active support, not like them liking a post or retweeting something, like active participation.
It's true, and I'm just hoping that it's a fair election, that
I'm
there
hoping
isn't,
so too.
because that's really what we need is a fair election.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think many of us have gotten so cautious that we are ready for anything. I think many of us expect it to be disingenuous in some way because what have we seen over the past 4 years? You know?
Yeah. Well, just because I'm just concerned because there was just so many problems with the 2016 election. But I just want people to vote and just do their part. And that's what I'm hoping for. Just do your part, and we're gonna work on the process of making sure that the 2020 election does its part.
Yes. Let's let it be the only good thing to happen in 2020, other than the Supreme Court ruling, of course, rulings that have been happening. Um, so yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit and start talking about identity. So I think it's like we have about 25 minutes left. So I think we should spend the 25 minutes talking about identities within that plus, and then also saving some time for poetry because I know we were going to do some poetry stuff at the end, which
Yes.
creative aspect to this is very significant to both Ari and myself. Um, so would you like to begin by talking about your own journey with regard to your identity, Ari? I don't think we got to talk about that last time.
I mean, sure, I can mention my identity. I'm non-binary, and I'm bisexual, but I'll talk about being non-binary. I so I grew up in a time when it was normal to be called tomboy. It's not a term that most people use anymore for children, because it's just kind of an outdated term. But I grew up as a tomboy. Um, I just was a very, like, masculine boy. I did a lot of boy things. I liked comic books, and I liked playing with Ninja Turtles, and I hung out with all the boys, and I was just a very masculine girl. And so I just, I did that for several years up until about, like, middle school, early high school. And even in high school, I was still very masculine. I had a stepsister who tended to be more girly. She was into, like, more feminine things. So it was like this stark contrast that she was very the and she's 2 weeks older than me, so we were both in the same grade. So it was like she was the girly one and I was the intellectual, like, boyish one. And so it was like we were kind of like night and day. So I it was just this weird mix that, like, I was the tomboy, she was the girly girl, and then I kinda related to, like, Daria in that way, that I was just kinda like this snarky, like, I'm kinda like this tomboy, punkish, I don't wanna be like the other girls, I wanna be like a boy, and that kind of continued on. But I tried to be more feminine as I got into my 20s and I started actually dating because I was trying to, like, have a boyfriend and be more feminine. So I kind of shifted more female. Um, but then when I got into my 30s, I was like, found out what non-binary was in, like, 2015 when I moved to Seattle, and I was like, "Oh, there's a term for what I am. Oh my god, there's a thing, and it's what I am." Because for a while there, I was like, I didn't have, like, a real I couldn't really place, like, how I was feeling. I had all of these, like, feelings, and I didn't have a name for it, and I started doing some reading on what non-binary was, and I was like, "This really describes what I am," and I was like I kind of, like, hemmed and hawed about it in the beginning because I used to go by she, they, and I used to be like, "Oh, yeah, you could call me she if you want to, I guess." And then I was like
If you must.
I was just like, "I guess you can call me she, but I am they, I guess." And so I was, like, really, like, because I still wear as you can tell, my gender expression, I still wear dresses. So because I'm non-binary, and I thought that, like, that made me less because I don't dress androgynously. I thought that that made me less non-binary. And so, like, I've wisened up that I realize, no, that doesn't make me less non-binary. I'm still non-binary. I'm because I represent both masculine and feminine traits. And so now I'm like, no, I am they.
Mhm.
I'm like strictly they. Like, no, I am very much they. I am very non-binary. You cannot change this. I am non-binary now. Thank you. And that's my story.
I think that I think it's good though, and it shows people that in a way it is growth, right? Like we're discovering more about ourselves even like into our 20s, into our 30s, and it's okay to do that. Like I think before we were talking about how people have like this belief that, oh, well, you have to come out and know exactly how to define yourself at a specific age. Whereas I believe that people can make new discoveries or discover something that they've noticed over time and finally, like in your case, have a term that describes it.
Yeah, I wish I had had that term when I was a teenager because it would have really changed a lot of stuff for me when I was young. I would have I think I would have experienced adulthood a lot differently if I had had that term.
Mhm.
Uh, because I just would have been more comfortable with my body, I think. I would have had a lot less dysmorphia about my body. And I think I would have probably not had an eating disorder. Um, Probably if I, I yeah,
Yeah.
if I had uh, more of a um, an understanding about my body.
Yeah. It's just it's like a conditioning to unlearn. Like if you look at the powerful groups who have defined different social norms like gender and sexual identity norms, whether it be based on performance or internal dynamics. And like I can in some ways relate to certain aspects of that because I know I've often struggled with expressing masculinity because I grew up, I was very feminine, and I just immediately felt more comfortable expressing myself in that fashion. Of course, like people shame and shame and shame. You try to like not be that way. And when I started dating, that's when I started like masculating myself more because that's what was more attractive, you know. And now that I'm in my 30s, I I don't I don't know, I don't really consider that as much anymore. Like I don't try to delete like feminine aspects of myself the way I used to out of shame. And I think that's something that a lot of people within the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ plus community go through because not only are we handling like society's overall expectations when it comes to gender performance and sexual identity, but also these different aspects within our smaller communities too. Because of course, like I mean, speaking as a gay man, like gay men have very specific notions of like gender performance specifically and what defines attractive versus unattractive. It's all fluid, and I think that's what many people don't realize. It's that fluidity that really should define it because everyone has a diversity when it comes to that expression.
Right.
So
That's true. Oh, and Taylor said something great. She said, clothes don't have a gender. And I think that's true. I think that the clothing industry has definitely made it so that we look at clothes differently. I was clothes shopping with my sister today and I bought this dress, but I was also looking in the men's section for clothes. And I was like, I want a printed t shirt, but I was like looking in the men's section and I was like, I have been trying to shift more masculine. And I was like, my ultimate goal someday is to like buy a pair of men's jeans for myself because they have bigger, deeper pockets. So I can put my cell phone in my pocket and it doesn't immediately fall out. Because I don't know if you know this, but women's jeans, they don't have deep pockets. The cell phones just fall out.
oh, clothing. It's also very much like color as well. Like I know I went on a tirade with a friend recently about like gender reveal parties and how it's
Oh,
always
no.
very much like gender normative with regard to pink or blue. And I remember I had a friend. I was invited to a friend's baby shower once. And I was one of those people. I was like, I'm going to be super self-aware and bring something that's more neutral color, that could be applied to either. And I did. I can't remember what it was. It was like yellow or red or something to that effect. And I got yelled at low key for not bringing something blue or pink.
Okay, so I have been known to get a little so my friend told me that she's having a baby, and she told me the gender of the baby, and I got kind of excited about the gender of the baby, because I I was just like, "Oh my god." And, like, I sorta fell into that trap that I was like, it was just really adorable to think of her having a little baby, and it was gonna be the specific gender, and it was just, like, gonna be this little bundle of joy, and, like, I could see it doing all these little gendered things and just living its little gendered life, but, like, I also thought, like, maybe it'll decide to do other things later on, but I was like, maybe it won't, but, like, I was like just thought about this little baby, like, just
Mm.
making little decisions on its own, and I was just, like, super happy.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that happiness either. And the truth is, um, like I think that it's all about how the child is taught as the child grows, like if a child is taught that, hey, you can choose to wear this dress or you can choose to wear these Carhartt overalls, you know? Like I think that like kids, especially in our generation, were never taught that like, oh, there is this choice and and it is acceptable whichever one you choose, Granted, the only problem is that other kids are not taught that, and that's where the shame comes in because that's what kind of careens into the criteria of bullying, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Taylor says, "Fuck gender reveal. As we start trying to conceive, my husband is convinced he will shame people who asks what we're having and say, 'You want to talk about my kid's genitals?'" Yes. Like, I think that would be a great thing to say to people.
It's true. It's like, yeah, I didn't wanna ask her about what kind of baby she was having, but I also was like I also was like I didn't wanna breach the subject, but I was like, "Do you know what you're having?" And she said, "Yes," and so then she told me, and I was like so that we kinda talked about it, but I was like, I didn't really wanna I don't know, if I should bring it up or if they shouldn't bring it up or if it's a big deal to bring it up, but I
Mhm.
guess it's one of those situations, I don't know.
Well, it's hard, especially if it's an awkward situation like that where you don't even know if you wanna, like, ask the person, like, if asking would even be too much, right? So,
Right.
it's like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yeah.
Because you shouldn't I guess you shouldn't care, you should just be happy that it's a baby and that it's coming into this world and that it's it's just gonna be healthy and happy and bring joy into this life, and, I mean, I'm just happy that because my friend has wanted this baby forever, like, as far as I can remember, like, she's wanted this baby, and
Mhm.
so I'm just happy that she's having this baby, so, like, I'm it doesn't really matter to me what the gender is.
Right. Well, I think it all comes back down to Like, I think people don't realize that these different things are a spectrum, you know? Like when I think of sexual identity, and gender expression, I kind of think of them as like being X and Y axes, and people falling at different points along these axes that could be even fluid, right? So I think this is also an excellent point for us to transition into talking about other identities within that plus category, right? And the one that I really want to touch on right now, and Taylor mentioned this last time, is demisexuality, right? So defining demisexuality, like looking up a few different definitions of the formal definition, it says that it's a type of sexuality or sexual orientation. People who identify as demisexual only feel sexual attraction to another person if they form a strong emotional bond or connection with them first. Okay. So like I don't think people really know right off the bat, especially like what demisexual would be. And I think a lot of this is the same with like other ones like asexuality too. Like people don't know those definitions right off the bat. So when they are finally exposed to them, it's very uncomfortable for them because they're like, this is something I don't know. I should know
Because it's
this.
off-putting. It's like, or it's off-putting when you think like when to like somebody who is sexual, because they think like that's just like the baseline and like that's how it is, and like it's this is biological and this is how it's supposed to be, and it's like, no, not everybody is like that.
Right,
And it's like,
exactly.
but it's like, no, not everybody is like that. Not everybody has those biological desires. Like, not everybody is the same way you are. Some people have to form an emotional bond. Some people don't form that bond at all. Some people have a completely different experience than you, and you have to respect that. And so
Exactly.
you have to just understand that some people don't have the same experiences as you do, and they are part of the queer community, and they are totally valid and they exist.
Exactly. And I like one thing I really find interesting about demisexuality is because it opens up the conversation about including like creating an emotional connection with people as being part of those axes that I was talking about.
Mhm.
Like emotional connection being a spectrum in of itself, and that defining a relationship before a sexual a sexual inclination does. And and I know that's very like I've had conversations with other people, like other gay men notably, about demisexuality, and they've been kind of uncomfortable about it because it's very commonplace among gay men to examine and to act on like the sexual motivation first. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, that's if somebody chooses that, that's completely valid. But there are also people who do lead off with looking at that emotional spectrum first. And those are the people who are often shamed for it. And I don't think that's right. I think that's not fair.
Um, so most of my female to female relationships have always been kind of demi-ish, or sort of more romantic, in the sense that I've had to like form a really strong romantic relationship with before I've had like relations with them. Which is less so with my male relationships. More my male relationships have been more sexualized in a sense, and
Mhm.
maybe that just has to do with the difference between the motivations of the sexes. But I have my experiences with women have been more more interesting, because I have had more conversations, more better like romance, because I've formed these strong emotional bonds with women than I have with men.
It's interesting, among gay men, like, it really is individualized, like, some gay men really really look at that, like, emotional, like, intimacy connection more so than the sexual connection, and for others, it's the opposite, you know? For me, that's shifted a lot over time, and depending on the person too. So I think that, like, just like, our bodies, like, have different chemical reactions to different people that we meet, you know? And, and I think that affects both, like, that sexual expression and that, like, kind of, like, emotive expression too.
I
So,
mean, not that I haven't had romantic relationships with men. I've had a few, and then I've had boyfriends, but, like, it's more rare for me to have a romantic relationship with a man than it is for me to have a romantic relationship with a woman.
right. Well, I
Mhm.
think that it's another kind of, like, culturally ingrained aspect of masculinity as well, that romanticism is weakness or deemed as being feminine and therefore less than. So that's another aspect of masculinity that a lot of people struggle with unlearning too, unfortunately.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that
That's an
that's not the
interesting
case
thought. I
all
didn't
the
really think
time.
about that before.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've really struggled with a long time because I've, like, being romantically driven a lot because I am definitely a hopeless romantic person. Um,
That's interesting because the guys that I did form romantic relationships with, they also kind of bucked gender roles. So
really?
yeah, they were like they kinda didn't play into gender roles as well. So they were
Mm.
so
Oh, refreshing, right?
right.
So, I think it's okay that we go over the hour mark a little bit. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so I think we could go to, maybe 15 minutes over because I definitely do wanna give some time for poetry and discussing that.
Sure, yeah. You wanna do that now?
Sure, my secret agenda is always poetry. Anyway, so, um, how many poems did you bring with you this evening?
Just one.
Just one? Would you like to lead off the evening with that one?
Sure. I wrote it today because because I was the one who suggested we do poetry. I was like, "Donnie, we need to have poetry hour." And he was like, "Yes." So I wrote a poem because I was like, "We're gonna do poetry hour," and I wrote a poem for it. It's called "What It's Like to Be Non-Binary in My Mind." So here we go. You know, in that Star Trek episode when they confront those beings of pure energy in the original series and then they all go off in the end? That's me on the inside, the real me, without a body, a being of pure light, energy at best, floating through the galaxy high velocity, living on lentils or lava or something hot like coffee to keep me warm. And I sleep only because it's required, but there are no eyes to close, just a form that collapses in on itself, becoming smaller and cooler and formless like a gas.
Oh, ooh, that gave me some goosebumps. Like, it's very interesting because I think a lot of that poem speaks to how we perceive ourselves in our own bodies, and how, in some ways, when we look at ourselves, like, part of us wants to cast away what we see, and another part of us sees those aspects of ourselves and wants to treasure them in some way, or kind of, not to be punny, kind of, like, view them on galactic proportions as being, like, vibrant, you know? I liked that.
Thank you. So let's hear yours.
I was actually gonna ask you first, about, because that was my interpretation of your poem. So when you were writing it, what was your thought process? Like, what were you feeling and
So
thinking?
so when I became non-binary, one of the things that I used to think about, like, when I first read about non-binary, like, when I was in Seattle, I used to picture myself, like, as a being of light, like pure energy and pure light without a body. And I would just like see myself as like this pure being without a gender. And like, I just like would imagine this perfect version of myself without like a body. And like I would ride the bus to work every day and I would just imagine this like perfect version of myself without a body. And like I would just close my eyes and listen to my music on the bus. And I would just listen to like chill hop. And I would just like imagine myself formless. And I would just like do this like every day for like weeks. And I would just like it was just, like, perfect. I would, like, listen to, like do my Duolingo, and I would just, like, become formless. And
Ooh.
I would just, like, become nothing.
Kind of like letting the walls and ourselves fall away
Yeah.
in a way. Because, I mean, thinking about it, like, from an identity perspective, like, I feel like walls are always placed around us by those who, like, define the parameters of those, and casting them away is, like, freeing. That sounds very freeing to me.
It was, yeah.
Mm, love it. So I have 2 poems. Um, so one is an old poem, and it's really angsty, and it's kind of one that disappeared for a long time. And then one is a newer poem, but this older poem is, what did I title it? I titled it "I Wouldn't Be a Man." And I wrote it after I had a very, very difficult conversation with somebody that I was interested in, and they basically were like telling me how to act, telling me how to be, and I was after that experience, I was kind of left very shattered, if that makes sense. So here is that. I wouldn't be a man. I wouldn't be a man if I told you about those cloudy Neptune eyes in front of your friends. I wouldn't be a man if I spoke love into your ear, whispers louder than storms. I wouldn't be a man if I held your hand, our skin touching, taboo to society, taboo to you. I wouldn't be a man if I wrote a poem, a literary spill of the joy I find in your slumberous smile. I wouldn't be a man if I wanted to wake up next to you, legs wrapped like DNA strands. I wouldn't be a man if I spoke of my love, um, like a garden, a leisurely baptism, but too feminine for you. I wouldn't be a man if I let my guard down and let eye rivers pour only to evaporate in arid breath. I wouldn't be a man if I expressed myself in any other way than being sexual because that's what real men do. And that's that one. Like, that's where I was kind of like at that point where I was like, I'm struggling with being romantic because I really want to build that emotional connection, but also, like, for a lot of gay men, it's that sexual, like, expression that matters the most or takes greater priority.
I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. This newer one, let's see. Oh, where was it? This one is kind of political.
Get into politics with me.
I do enjoy getting political. This one is definitely more of a grown-up, like, I'm a 30-year-old gay man writing about stuff poem, not 18-year-old Gaby. All right, so this poem is titled Abrasion. Here it goes. It's a wonder we're still here. Our warranties expired in high school after years of gradual wear. Now, war-hardened bodies sit in offices, classrooms, and gyms with hope that the daily grind will alleviate us of every slur, distract ourselves from the adult bullies who still throw around the word queer. We strive to stride with hands held, yet sometimes we stand in supermarkets like anxious deer with ears held back, only to wonder if we'll hear someone say, faggots. Children point at us, ask parents for explanations at all the inopportune times, but get no response, the historic perpetuation of misinterpretation we all still find. Our partnered palms sweat when we think of Matthew. Our skin crawls when we remember Pulse. Our families worry when we're out, but we know our closet doors fell off long ago. Don't worry, Mom and Dad. We're happy the way we are, so we'll fly our flag as high as we possibly can and be the foundation on which the new can stand. The years of painful abrasion won't destroy us because now we're smooth fields of granite. And that was that one.
War-hardened bodies.
Yeah. I just like when I was writing that, I'm trying to remember what happened, what motivated that. But I think, oh no, it was my partner and I were at a store, and I remember like we don't I mean we don't normally engage in public displays of affection because I think we both have like this subliminal fear of that, living in like a predominantly conservative area. And there was a day where we did briefly, and there was somebody in the vicinity like with a kid, and they looked super uncomfortable, and the kid was like understandably curious. And and I remember feeling this very deep-seated fear of like, please don't let us be next, or please don't let something happen, like this fear of like we need to get out of here. And I've experienced it before, but I didn't think that I would experience it now, being the age that I am, thinking that with all that I've gone through, I should be at a point now where I don't have to worry about that type of thing. When the cold, hard truth is, many of us still do because of the current state of things.
That's what I loved about Seattle. Did I tell you my first month there? So I was like getting settled and like getting my apartment and working my job and stuff. So I went for a walk and I was walking around. I think it was Queen Anne or just around like near my hostel. And I had gotten dinner and it was just late afternoon. It was around what I call the golden hour when the sun is starting to go down, and it's just a very peaceful afternoon. I'm full. I just feel really good. I'm in a good mood. But then all of a sudden, I walk up and there's a gay couple holding hands, and it's not even really like a big deal. They're just holding hands, and they're just on a walk, and it's just a normal day. It's just a normal Sunday, and it's just a day like any other day. And that's when I felt like I was at home, because in any other city on any other day, they might have gotten in a lot of trouble for doing that, but not in Seattle. And that's when I
Mm.
knew, like, that was my city. You know what I mean?
That is powerful though. I I feel like I should expect the reaction that I got based on, this region. But another part of me, and I know my partner and I had a conversation about this afterward. We were like, we're not gonna discourage ourselves from loving each other in public
Right.
because people don't understand or don't feel comfortable. because that's not fair to us. It doesn't honor all that we've endured to get to this point,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of it, like a lot of people within our communities, just like they're like that fear is a conditioning. It's a conditioned response to years of bullying, of families being oppressive, so on and so forth. So, like the learning experiences happen on multiple fronts, including those of us who have been out for a long time, who who know who we are. We know who we are, but sometimes things like that happen where it kind of like makes us take a step back and re-examine like those deep-seated things that still are there. They probably will be there a long time, but
Right.
but it's how we handle them now that really matters too. So, but and since that experience though, like I've not had anything like that happen. So and that's been like over a year ago. Um and I think after we both kind of examined our own insecurities and our own like concerns, like we kind of cultivated some confidence after that too. Because for both him and I, this like we are both in the longest, most committed relationship that we've ever been in. So at the end of the day, like our love for each other is more powerful and more significant than the discomfort, the fleeting discomfort that bystanders have.
I just wish that, like, how do we make it so that, like, everywhere is like that, where you can just hold hands in public and it not be a big deal?
I would say education. Almost every social issue, I think, always comes back down to education because discomfort is a learned experience. Hate is a learned experience. Homophobia, transphobia, all of that are learned experiences. Those are passed down
I think that it
from.
also has to do with the fact that a lot of people flock to Seattle and that there's a community.
Mhm. Oh yeah, like Seattle is very much known as a place that's LGBTQ plus friendly, and a lot of LGBTQ plus people feel safe. And that's I think that can be said for a lot of large city settings too. But when you like move beyond the cities into like rural areas, that's where like people start getting a little bit more concerned because in rural areas there are fewer LGBTQ plus people because those people usually, if they're not born there, they end up just gravitating toward those safer places. But I also think a solution is exposure. Like I've had so many people tell me like, "Donny, I had never met a gay person until you." And you can like just being in your presence, like being exposed to somebody in the community has helped me like understand that this grandiose villainization of LGBTQ plus people is not real at all whatsoever. And I find that empowering when I hear about that because it's a simple thing, exposure.
Yeah.
So, but and I know we're going to be ending here in another minute or two, but I think one other thing that LGBTQ plus people I think need to do is don't be afraid to have educational conversations so long as you feel safe and able to do so. Because the truth is, a lot of people just don't understand. They've never experienced our sets of experiences, and sometimes you have to illustrate things for them or help them see things from a different perspective. So, and some people might take offense. Some people might feel like they're getting attacked. Those people might be more difficult to reach. If they are, then I mean, they have to learn on their own time. If they never learn, that's something that we have to accept too, unfortunately, because we can't strike enlightenment in everyone we come across, as much as I always think that I can and that we all can. Well, Ari, do you have any parting words?
Letter writing campaigns, vote.
Vote, register to vote. I'm going to post a link in the description section below where you can go like register to vote or update your voter registration if you have not done that yet.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, this was a great conversation. We went on a little bit longer, but I think it was well worth it. Tune in next week, same time on Thursday. We'll be having another episode. Keep an eye on our social medias because we will be posting what our topic will be. If you need to find our social media outlets, you can find those in the description section below as well. All right. Anyway, I love you all, and you all have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye.